In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, far beyond the scope of humanity's known space, the warship Phoenix drifted, lost and broken. The once mighty ship, a symbol of humanity's strength, now lay crippled on an alien world. Its crew was scattered, disorganized, and struggling. The mission had gone wrong from the start. The ship had been ambushed by a mysterious alien race during a routine reconnaissance mission, and now, with most of their systems damaged and little hope of rescue, the humans were on their own. Among the survivors was Captain Jax Carter, the leader of the Phoenix crew. His once confident and authoritative presence was now dampened by a deep, painful wound. Blood had soaked through his shirt, and though he tried to stand tall, his knees trembled beneath him. Jax had always been the first to step up, the one who led his crew with a fiery determination. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of defeat. The ship's emergency beacon had been activated, but with the planet's harsh environment and a lack of communication with their command base, there was no way to know if help was on the way. The crew had been on this alien planet for weeks now, and survival was becoming a daily struggle. The world they found themselves on was strange and unwelcoming. Towering trees with thick, twisting branches spread above them like the arms of ancient giants, and the ground was covered in soft, luminous moss. At night, strange creatures roamed the dense forests, their glowing eyes flickering through the shadows. But it wasn't just the planet's hostility that weighed heavily on the crew. It was the fact that the enemy, the Aelith, had already shown their power. Though the Phoenix had managed to escape the initial attack, they were no match for the Aelith's advanced technology. The crew had no way of fighting back. In the command center of what was left of the ship, the humans gathered. Ava Sinclair, a communications officer, was among them. Her sharp mind had been a great asset during the crisis, but even she could not hide the growing sense of hopelessness. She sat on a bench, her head in her hands, staring at the flickering displays. She had always thought she was prepared for war. But this was different. The Aelith were not like any enemy she had ever faced. Ava's mind wandered back to the first time she had encountered the Aelith. Not in battle, but in an unexpected way. She had been assigned to the mission to monitor alien communication on the distant planets of the Xantar system. The Aelith, an ancient and mysterious race, had long been rumored to possess technology that could rival the best humanity had to offer, but no one had ever confirmed their existence. Until now. It was in those early moments after the attack that she realized how much more there was to the Aelith than their technology. The brief exchange she had with one of their representatives had revealed their thoughts on humanity. They saw something in humans. Something she hadn't understood at first. It wasn't just the violence they had witnessed or the destruction that followed them. It was something deeper. Something the Aelith couldn't yet trust. Something humanity had to prove. Ava rubbed her temples, her thoughts interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Captain Jax approached, supported by 2 crew members. His face was pale, but he was still alive, still determined to fight. Ava stood, offering him a concerned glance, but he waved her off. "I'm fine," Jax said, his voice hoarse but steady. "How are the repairs?" "Slow," Ava answered. "We're running out of time, Captain. We need to find a way to contact headquarters." "I know," Jax said, his eyes scanning the room as he sat down at the console. "But we can't keep relying on help. We need to stand on our own." Ava nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. There was a strange energy in the air. Every time they tried to repair their communication systems, something blocked their efforts. It wasn't just interference. It felt deliberate, as though something, or someone, was watching them. Just then, the door slid open, and a figure entered. Loris, the Aelith leader, appeared on the threshold. He was tall, his skin a pale shade of silver, his features sharp and defined, his eyes glowing with an almost otherworldly light, locked onto Ava's with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. The Aelith had arrived on the planet days before, and their presence was undeniable. They had left their mark on everything, from the technology they had seized from the Phoenix to the very air they breathed. "Captain Carter," Loris said, his voice smooth and melodic.
"I've been watching your people." Jax raised an eyebrow, but he remained silent. Ava, on the other hand, felt a chill run down her spine.
There was something about Loris that unsettled her. The way he carried himself, the way he spoke. Everything about him radiated an unspoken power, but it wasn't just his presence that unnerved her. It was the look he gave her, as though he saw something inside her that no one else could.
"You've seen us struggle," Jax finally spoke. "What do you want from us?"
Loris tilted his head slightly. "I want nothing from you, Captain, but I've seen enough to know that you're more than just survivors. You're capable of much more." Ava watched carefully, sensing the underlying tension in the conversation. The Aelith weren't known for their alliances, and their sudden appearance on the planet felt too calculated. Why hadn't they just destroyed the Phoenix when they had the chance? What was their true purpose? "Then help us," Ava said, her voice calm but firm. "Help us contact our people." "We've been stranded here for weeks." Loris stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Your people are not my concern," he said softly. "But I will offer you a chance, human." He paused, his voice lowering even more.
"Prove your worth." Ava frowned. "Prove our worth?"
"How?" "You will undergo a trial," Loris said, his tone becoming serious. "I will test you and your people."
"If you succeed, I will help you. If not," he let the sentence hang in the air, leaving it to their imaginations. Jack stood abruptly, his expression hardening. "And what if we refuse?" Loris didn't flinch.
"Then you will remain stranded here, alone, until your ship falls apart, until your crew dies, one by one."
The room fell silent. Ava could feel the weight of his words, but she also felt something else, something within herself that said there was more to this than met the eye. The Aelith, as powerful as they were, had to have a reason for approaching them like this. There was a test, yes, but it wasn't just about strength. It was something else, something deeper. "I'll do it," Ava said, surprising even herself. She stepped forward, meeting Loris's gaze. "I'll take the trial." Loris nodded, a small smile curling at the corners of his lips. Then it begins. The morning after Loris had given his ultimatum, the crew of the Phoenix woke to a strange sense of foreboding. The air felt heavy, as if the weight of the upcoming trial pressed down on every person. Ava stood outside the remnants of the ship, staring at the massive, glowing trees that loomed around them. The forest was alive with the sounds of distant creatures, but there was something unsettling about the stillness in the air. It was as though everything was waiting. The Aelith had made it clear humanity had to prove itself worthy. But how could they? What did Loris mean by proving their worth? Ava couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about strength or survival. The Aelith had been observing them for far longer than they realized, and now they would be tested in ways they hadn't prepared for. The day passed in a blur of preparation. The crew gathered around what remained of the command center, discussing their options, trying to make sense of the Aelith's offer. Captain Jax Carter, despite his injuries, remained the calm center of their group. He had always been the one to guide them through tough situations, but now, Ava noticed, there was a hesitation in his eyes. He knew something they didn't. He could feel it, too, the weight of the unknown.
"They're not here to help us," Jax said quietly, his voice a low rumble.
"The Aelith want something from us. They want to see if we're worth the trouble." Ava looked at him, confused. "Then why offer to help us? Why not just leave us here to die?" Jax looked out at the horizon, his expression hardening. "Because they've seen something in us. Something they're testing. We've always been more than just survivors. We've always been willing to fight for what's right, no matter the cost.
I think that's what they're after. Ava didn't fully understand, but she knew Jax was right about one thing. They couldn't afford to fail.
Not now. The trial, whatever it would be, was their only chance to get off this planet, to return to the stars, and to show the Aelith that humanity wasn't something to be underestimated. Later that evening, just as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Loris appeared again. This time, he was not alone. A group of Aelith warriors stood at his side, their tall forms glowing faintly in the darkness. Their eyes, silver and piercing, scanned the humans, sizing them up. Loris stepped forward, his movements graceful and controlled. "The trial begins now," he said, his voice commanding yet soft. "Follow me." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked into the forest, his warriors trailing behind him. The humans had no choice but to follow. Ava's heart pounded in her chest as she walked beside Jax. She could feel the presence of the Aelith behind them, watching their every move. The trees around them seemed to close in, their twisted branches reaching out like the fingers of some ancient, unseen entity. The air was thick with tension. Ava could barely breathe, but she forced herself to remain calm. The others needed her to stay strong. After a short time, they reached a clearing. At the center stood a stone platform, dark and smooth, its surface glistening in the faint moonlight. Loris stopped and turned to face them.
"This is the first test," he said. "You will each face a challenge."
You will be tested not on your physical strength, but on your mind, your spirit, your ability to think beyond yourself. I will judge whether you are worthy of the Aelith's trust." Ava's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that whatever it was, it would be unlike anything she had ever faced. She exchanged a glance with Jax, who gave her a small nod. Whatever this trial was, they would face it together. Loris stepped aside and gestured toward the platform. "Captain Carter, you will be the first to face the trial."
Jax nodded and stepped forward, his face set in determination.
He had always been a leader, the one to face danger head on. Ava could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. He was ready, but there was something more, something Ava couldn't quite put her finger on. Jax was carrying the weight of something deeper than just the responsibility of being a captain. Loris raised his hand, and suddenly, the ground beneath Jax's feet seemed to shift. The platform before him cracked open, revealing a swirling vortex of light and darkness. Ava's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was something else entirely. Jax stood tall, stepping closer to the vortex. Ava wanted to call out, to warn him, but she couldn't find her voice. Loris stood behind them, watching closely, his eyes never leaving Jax's form. "Do you understand the stakes, Captain?" Loris asked, his voice cool and detached. Jax nodded. "I do." And then, without another word, Jax stepped into the swirling darkness. For a long moment, everything was silent. Ava's heart raced as she watched, her hands trembling. What was happening to him? The vortex seemed to pulse, the light flickering like a dying star. The others stood still, waiting for something to happen, but no one spoke. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light disappeared. The vortex collapsed in on itself, leaving only the stone platform. Jax was gone. Ava felt her breath catch in her throat. Had he failed? Was he lost? For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. But then, slowly, Jax emerged from the shadows, his eyes wide with a strange mixture of relief and confusion. He stepped forward, his body trembling slightly. I don't know what happened, Jax said, his voice shaky. It was like I was trapped in a place between worlds. I saw things, visions of the past, the future, and I don't know.
I don't know how to explain it.
Lore's gaze never wavered as he approached Jax. You were shown your greatest fears, your deepest doubts. You had to face them and overcome them. You did not choose the easy path. You chose to confront your own weakness, and in doing so, you proved your worth. Jax swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Ava could see the emotional toll the trial had taken on him. He wasn't just a captain. He was a man who had been pushed to the edge of his own humanity. You may have passed the first test, Loris continued, but there is more to come. Ava felt a cold chill run down her spine. If this was just the beginning, then what awaited them next? She couldn't help but feel a sense of fear growing within her. What would she face in the trial? What would they all face? And, most importantly, could humanity truly prove itself worthy of the Aleth's trust? As the rest of the crew watched, Loris turned to Ava.
Your turn will come, human. But remember, this trial is not about defeating your enemies.
It is about confronting yourself. Only then will you understand what makes you worthy. Ava took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't back down now. She stepped forward, her heart racing. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it head on. For herself, for her crew, for humanity. Ava stood at the edge of the stone platform, watching the remaining crew members step forward for their trials. The air around her felt thick, filled with tension and uncertainty. Every breath she took felt heavier than the last. She had seen Jax, the captain, face his trial, and though he had returned, the experience had left him shaken. What would happen to her? What would she face in this strange and dangerous test designed by the Aleth? Lore stood nearby, his glowing eyes fixed on her. His presence alone was enough to make her feel small, like a child in the presence of a being far more ancient and powerful than anything she could comprehend. He had promised her a trial, unlike any other, a trial of the mind, the spirit. Ava wasn't sure what that meant, but she was about to find out. Jax, though still recovering from his own trial, had come to stand beside her. His face was pale, and his usual confident stance was now tempered by something Ava couldn't quite place. He had seen something in that vortex, something that had tested him in ways that even his leadership experience hadn't prepared him for. The vulnerability she saw in him now made her question what kind of trial lay ahead for her.
You'll be fine, Jack said, his voice low but reassuring.
You've got this. Ava nodded, though the unease inside her remained. She had always considered herself a strong person. She had faced countless challenges, worked her way through tough situations. But this was different. She wasn't just being tested on her strength or her intelligence. She was about to face something much deeper, something that would force her to look within and confront everything she had tried to avoid. Lore stepped forward, his long limbs moving with an unnatural grace.
Ava Sinclair,
He said, his voice cool and measured. It is time for you to face your trial. Ave looked at the ground beneath her, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew it would be a test she couldn't hide from. Her mind flashed back to the mission she had been assigned to the long hours spent in the communication hub, decoding alien signals, to the day they had found the Phoenix in that distant part of space, and everything had gone wrong. She had tried to be brave then. She had tried to keep everyone calm, but deep down, she had been just as scared as the rest of them. When she looked up, Lore was already waiting, his eyes locking onto hers with a silent expectation. Ava took a deep breath and stepped forward, her feet heavy against the ground, her mind racing. There was no turning back now. Whatever was about to happen, she had to face it. As soon as she reached the center of the platform, the ground beneath her feet shifted. The stone, once smooth and solid, cracked open, revealing the same swirling vortex that had taken Jax.
Ava's breath caught in her throat.
This was it. The test. Lores raised his hand, his fingers glowing with an eerie light.
Step forward,
he commanded, and face what lies within. Ava hesitated, but only for a moment. She knew this was what she had to do. She had no choice but to step into the unknown. Slowly, carefully, she moved toward the vortex. Her hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the swirling light. For a second, she felt the pull, a strange force tugging at her. The next moment, she was falling. The world around her spun, the light flashing brighter, the darkness pressing in. Ava tried to scream, but no sound came. She had no control over her body, no way to stop the fall. It felt as though she was being pulled through time and space, each second stretching into eternity. The disorienting sensation made her stomach churn, and for a moment, she thought she might pass out. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Ava found herself standing in a dark, unfamiliar place. The ground beneath her feet was cold, smooth, and unyielding. She couldn't see anything at first, but slowly, shapes began to take form in the shadows. Figures appeared in front of her, their faces obscured, their bodies distorted. She couldn't make out their features, but their presence was overwhelming. She felt them watching her, waiting.
You are not who you think you are,
A voice echoed, though she couldn't tell where it came from. It wasn't one voice, but many, overlapping, speaking as one. You are not the person you showed to the world. You are something else entirely. Ame's heart raced. The words seemed to reverberate inside her, rattling her bones. She wanted to respond, to ask what this was. But she couldn't find her voice. The shadows around her shifted, closing in, pressing against her. They felt familiar, but she couldn't place why. The voice continued, growing louder.
You hide behind a mask, Ava Sinclair. You pretend to be strong, but you are afraid. You are afraid to face the truth about who you really are.
Ava's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. The weight of the words pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. She had always prided herself on being strong. She had worked so hard to become the person she was today. But now, in the darkness, with the voices surrounding her, she felt small. She felt weak. No, she gasped, struggling to rise to her feet. I'm not afraid. I'm not. But the voices didn't stop. They circled around her, drowning her in their accusations.
You are afraid of failure. You are afraid of the truth.
You are afraid to let others see who you truly are. Ava shook her head.
No, I faced challenges before.
I've led my crew. You've only ever run from the truth, Ava.
You hide from what you fear most. You fear being weak.
You fear being vulnerable.
The words cut through her, sharper than any weapon. Ava squeezed her eyes shut, but the voices only grew louder. The figures surrounding her were closing in, and she felt their judgment bearing down on her. For a long moment, Ava couldn't think. She couldn't move. She was trapped in this dark place, overwhelmed by her own insecurities. She wanted to escape, to run, but where would she go? There was no way out. There was only the truth, and she had been running from it her whole life. She had always put on a strong face, pretending to be the leader, the one who had everything together. But the truth was, she was terrified. She was terrified that she wasn't enough, that no matter how hard she tried, she would always fall short. The voices reached their crescendo, and Ava felt like she was suffocating under their weight. But then, something inside her shifted. It wasn't sudden, but slow, like a dawning realization. She had been running, yes, but she had also been fighting. She had been fighting to survive, to protect those she cared about. And in that fight, she had learned something. She wasn't perfect. She didn't have to be. With that thought, the voices began to fade. The pressure on her chest lifted, and the darkness slowly receded. Ava took a deep, shuddering breath, her mind clearing. She realized that she had faced her greatest fear. Not death, not failure, but the truth about herself. She wasn't perfect, but she was strong in her own way. The shadows faded, and Ava found herself standing once more on the stone platform. Loris was there, watching her with his piercing gaze. "You have faced yourself, Ava Sinclair," he said, his voice soft. "You have proven that you are worthy. Not because you are flawless, but because you are willing to confront your fears." Ava's heart pounded in her chest, but there was no fear now. Only a quiet strength. She had faced the darkness inside her and come out the other side, stronger. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice steady. "What's next?" Loris nodded, the faintest of smiles touching his lips.
You have passed the test, but the real challenge lies ahead.
You must now prove your worth to your people. Only then will you understand the true meaning of strength.
Ava took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had passed the test, but the real battle was just beginning. The air was thick with uncertainty as Ava stepped back from the stone platform. She had faced the trial, confronted her own deepest fears, and emerged stronger. But the Eleth were not satisfied yet. Loris had promised that there was more to come, and Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of the trial was still ahead.
Jack stood beside her, his face still pale from his own trial.
He had seemed shaken when he returned, his hands trembling. The words that Loris had spoken about confronting one's own weaknesses had clearly affected him as well. But Jack's, ever the leader, had pushed through. Ava could see the pain in his eyes, but there was something else there now. Something that hadn't been there before. A quiet strength. Ava glanced around at the rest of the crew. They were watching her, waiting for her to speak, waiting for some sign that everything would be okay. She didn't know what to tell them. How could she explain what had just happened? How could she put into words the experience of facing herself, of seeing the truth of who she really was? Loris stepped forward, his glowing eyes locking onto hers. "You have passed the trial of the mind, Ava Sinclair. But there is one more test. One final challenge awaits you. The question is simple. Will you act on what you've learned? Or will you continue to hide behind your fears?" Ava swallowed hard. The challenge ahead wasn't just a test of strength or intelligence. It was something more. It was about what she would do next, whether she would lead her crew through the next step of their journey, or let her doubts and fears dictate their fate. Jax took a deep breath beside her. "What's the next trial, Loris?" he asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. Loris studied them both for a moment before answering.
"The next trial will test your unity."
You have proven your individual strength, but now you must prove that you can work together as a team. The Aleph will not offer assistance. You will face this challenge on your own. Ava's heart skipped a beat. Unity. She knew what that meant. The crew, already divided by fear, uncertainty, and the endless challenges they had faced, would now be pushed to their breaking point. They couldn't afford to lose one another. But could they come together when it mattered most? Could they find the strength to face the Aelith's final trial? Loris extended his arm, gesturing to the darkened forest. "Follow me," he commanded. And without another word, he turned and began walking toward the trees. The crew followed closely behind, the air tense with anticipation. The path through the forest was narrow and winding. The trees seemed to close in on them, their twisted branches casting strange shadows that danced across the ground. The sound of distant creatures echoed through the trees, but there was no sign of danger. For now, at least, Ava couldn't help but feel that something was coming. They were being watched, of that she was sure. After what felt like hours of walking, they came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive structure made of stone, unlike anything they had seen before. It was tall, towering high above them, with intricate carvings etched into its surface. The air around it seemed to hum with an energy that Ava could feel deep within her bones. "This is the final trial," Loris said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The structure before you is not just a building. It is a test. You must enter and reach the top. But beware, there are obstacles inside. You will face challenges that will force you to confront your deepest fears and doubts.
Only by working together will you succeed." Ava looked up at the towering structure, her mind racing.
It seemed impossible. How could they make it to the top, especially with the obstacles they were about to face? But she knew they had no choice. This was it, the final trial. And if they failed here, everything would have been for nothing.
"Remember," Loris continued, "you must work together. If you try to do this alone, you will fail."
The Aelith will not intervene. The outcome is in your hands.
Jax turned to the crew, his expression serious. "All right, everyone."
We've been through a lot, but this is the time to pull together. We're in this together.
We've always been in this together. Trust each other, and we'll make it through. Ava nodded, though the doubt still lingered inside her. Could they really do this? Could they trust each other enough to make it to the top? She had learned a lot during her trial, about herself, about her fears. But the others, they were still struggling, still reeling from the damage the Aelith had inflicted on them. It wasn't just physical wounds they carried now. It was the emotional scars that would take much longer to heal. They stepped forward into the structure, the air growing colder as they crossed the threshold. The walls were smooth and cold to the touch, and the darkness inside seemed to swallow them whole. They couldn't see much, but the faint glow of Loris's eyes illuminated the path ahead. As they moved deeper into the structure, the first obstacle appeared. The floor suddenly shifted beneath their feet, and the ground cracked open, revealing a vast chasm. There was no bridge, no way across, only a sheer drop into the darkness below. Ava's heart raced. How were they supposed to get across? She could feel the panic rising in her chest, the fear of failing. But then, she remembered what Loris had said. They had to work together. They couldn't do this alone.
"Hold on!" Jax called out. "We can do this!" "Everyone gather together. We need to find a way across." "There has to be something." They all gathered at the edge of the chasm, their eyes scanning the walls.
There was nothing obvious, no hidden path. But then, Ava spotted something, barely visible in the dim light. A series of handholds carved into the stone walls. It was barely noticeable, but it was there.
"We can climb," Ava said, pointing to the handholds.
"It's not much, but it's something," Jax nodded. "Let's do it." They climbed together, each person taking turns, helping each other across the treacherous path. There were moments of fear, times when one of them slipped or almost lost their grip, but they never let go of each other. They pulled one another up, never hesitating, never doubting that they could make it. Ava, for the first time in a long while, felt the weight of their unity. They were stronger together than they had ever been apart. After what felt like hours, they reached the other side. The next challenge came quickly, and it was just as difficult. The walls of the structure began to close in on them, narrowing until there was only a small space left to move. The air grew thick, and their breaths became shallow. But they didn't give up. They squeezed through the narrow passage, helping each other through, trusting each other to make it through the next obstacle. At last, they reached the top. The structure opened up into a wide open space, and they could see the sky above them. The final test had been completed. Loris was waiting for them at the top, his expression unreadable. He looked at each of them, his gaze lingering on Ava for a moment longer than the others. "You have proven your worth," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not because you succeeded in the trial, but because you learned to trust each other. You learned that strength is not found in isolation. It is found in unity.
Ava took a deep breath, her chest heavy with the weight of the journey they had just completed. The trial was over, but the real work was just beginning. They had proven their worth, not just to the Aelith, but to each other. As they made their way back to the Phoenix, Ava knew that they had changed. The crew was no longer just a group of individuals. They were a team, and together they would face whatever came next.